The finding, accepted for publication in Nature, offers evidence that in the future, Webb may be able to detect and measure carbon dioxide in the thinner atmospheres of smaller rocky planets. Wasp 39b is a hot gas giant with mass roughly 1/4 that of Jupiter, about the same as Saturn, and a diameter 1.3 times greater than Jupiter. Its extreme puffiness is related in part to its high temperature, about 1600 degrees Fahrenheit. Unlike the cooler, more compact gas giants in our solar system, Wasp 39b orbits very close to its star, only about 1/8 the distance between the Sun and Mercury, completing one circuit in just over 4 Earth days. The planet's discovery, reported in 2011, was made based on ground-based detections of the subtle periodic dimming of light from its host star as the planet transits or passes in front of the star. From other telescopes, NASA's Hubble and Spitzer space telescopes, revealed the presence of water vapor, sodium, and potassium in the planet's atmosphere. Webb's unmatched infrared sensitivity has now confirmed the presence of carbon dioxide on this planet as well. Transiting planets like Wasp 39b, whose orbits we observe edge on rather than from above, can provide researchers with ideal opportunities to probe planetary atmospheres. During the transit, some of the starlight is eclipsed by the planet, completely causing the overall dimming, and some is transmitted through the planet's atmosphere. Because different gases absorb different combinations of colors, researchers can analyze small differences in brightness of the transmitted light across a spectrum of wavelengths to determine exactly what an atmosphere is made of. With its combination of inflated atmosphere and frequent transits, Wasp 39b is an ideal target for transmission spectroscopy. The research team used Webb's near-infrared spectrograph, or NIRSpec, for its observations of Wasp 39b. In the resulting spectrum of the exoplanet's atmosphere, a small hill between 4.1 and 4.6 microns presents the first clear, detailed evidence of carbon dioxide ever detected in a planet outside the solar system. No observatory has ever measured such subtle differences in brightness of so many individual colors across the 3 to 5.5 micron range in an exoplanet transmission spectrum before. Access to this part of the spectrum is crucial for measuring abundances of gases like water and methane, as well as carbon dioxide, which are thought to exist in many different types of exoplanets. Understanding the composition of a planet's atmosphere is important because it tells us something about the origin of the planet and how it evolved. By measuring this carbon dioxide feature, scientists can determine how much solid versus how much gaseous material was used to form this gas giant planet. In the coming decade, James Webb will make this measurement for a variety of planets, providing insight into the details of how planets form and the uniqueness of our own solar system. This near-spec prism observation of Wasp 39b is just one part of a larger investigation that includes observations of the planet using multiple Webb instruments, as well as observations of 2 other transiting planets. The investigation, which is part of the Early Release Science program, was designed to provide the exoplanet research community with robust Webb data as soon as possible. The goal is to analyze the early release science observations quickly and develop open source tools for the science community to use. This enables contributions from all over the world and ensures that the best possible science will come out of the coming decades of observations. Now, in space history for this past week, August the 24th, 2006, well, for 76 years, school children were taught that our solar system had 9 planets: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Well, 16 years ago, on August the 24th, 2006, Pluto lost its planetary status, and the world's perception changed. The International Astronomical Union, the IAU, boo, is the official entity responsible for naming and classifying all bodies in outer space. And when they met in Prague, Czech Republic in August 2006, there was a vigorous debate about the definition of objects in our solar system. At the end of the meeting, the IAU voted to classify a planet as a celestial body that A, is in orbit around the sun, B, has sufficient mass for its self-gravity to overcome rigid body forces so that it assumes a hydrostatic equilibrium nearly round shape, and C, has cleared the neighborhood around its orbit. Pluto meets the first two criteria, but not the third, so it falls into the new category of dwarf planet. While the definition of a planet remains stable for most of the 20th century, objects in our solar system have been recategorized before. For example, Ceres was originally classified as a planet, but was later redesignated as an asteroid, and under the new definition, it is now a dwarf planet. It's still a planet for me. Okay, August the 25th, back in 2003, the Spitzer Space Telescope was launched from Cape Canaveral. It was the fourth and final of the NASA Great Observatories program. It was named for astronomer Lyman Spitzer, who first promoted the concept of a space telescope in the 1940s. The planned mission was to be 2.5 years, but the mission ended on January the 30th, 2020, so way outlasting its life. On August the 26th, back in 1918, that was the birthday of NASA research mathematician Katherine Johnson. Johnson, whose story is recounted in the Margot Lee Shetterly's Hidden Figures, was one of the women who worked on the computations for early space flights. From a young age, she was on track to make history, graduating from high school. She worked a number of years. Then in 1953, she began working for the NACA as one of the female mathematicians known as computers. At NASA Langley Research Center, she calculated trajectories for Alan Shepard and John Glenn's Mercury missions. Her work on orbital rendezvous calculations was fundamental to the success of the Apollo lunar missions. Johnson worked as a mathematician for NASA until 1986. In 2015, President Barack Obama awarded her a Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor. She passed away on February 24, 2020, at the age of 101. And 60 years ago today, Mariner 2 was launched to Venus, becoming the first successful interplanetary spacecraft and the first to measure the solar wind. The launch was just 36 days after the failure of Mariner 1. Mariner 2 was equipped with an identical complement of instrumentation as its predecessor. After a course correction on September 4, 1962, the spacecraft flew by Venus at a range of 21,660 miles on December 14, 1962. During a 42-minute scan of Venus, Mariner 2 gathered significant data on the atmosphere and the surface before continuing on to heliocentric orbit. The radiometers in particular were able to conduct 5 scans of the night side of the planet, 8 across the terminator and 5 on the daylight side. NASA maintained contact until January 3, 1963, when the spacecraft was 53.9 million miles from Earth, a new distance record for a deep space probe. And finally, astronaut birthdays for this past week, and there are so many of them that I'm just going to read off their names and their birthdays and not tell you what all their missions were. Some of them were on quite a few missions, so you are welcome to go look those up. But happy birthday to these astronauts. August the 22nd, 1932, Gerald Carr. August the 23rd, we have David Wolf, Dominic Antonelli, and August the 24th, we have Gregory Jarvis, Richard Richards, Anna Lee Fisher, Steve Lindsay, Mary Ellen Weber. August the 25th, happy birthday to Lee Armstrong-Balt, Andrew Feistel, Joe Engel. August the 26th, Going a little fast there. Joe Engel, John Blaha, and Catherine Heyer. So lots of birthdays. If you want to be an astronaut, you need to be born between August the 21st and the 27th. So that's all I have. This is K5KTX. Back to you, Billy.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, there's a lot of August birthdays, and a lot of them on the same day, too. That was really a wild something to see there. I think, yeah, Chaz had mentioned earlier about possibly skipping Constellation of the Week, and I think given what time it is, we probably should. So, Chaz, if you will keep that in reserve for next week, that would be awesome. So next up is space launches for the week. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Tom. If you'll see if we have anybody on frequency that wants to check in, do a quick check-in round, and then go ahead and give your report on the space launches for this week. So this is to KE5ICX from KF5PDS.
Right, I'll do exactly that. This is KE5ICX. I will take additional check-ins. If you'd like to join us this evening, please come now with your call sign phonetically, your name, where you are transmitting from.
Kilo Golf 5, Alpha Papa Lima, Patrick in Dallas. Bravo 9, near Oscar Kilo, Sean in Fort Worth.
Good, we picked up two more. We've got KG5APL, that's Patrick in Dallas, and KB9SOK, Sean in Fort Worth. Okay, well, let's see here. Space launches for the week. Well, we all know what's happening on Monday, but let me give you some of the others. We have August 27, 28, we have a Falcon 9 Starlink 4-23 launch from Cape Canaveral. This is another batch of Starlink Internet satellites. Falcon 9 first stage booster will land on a drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean. August 29th is the Space Launch System Artemis One Launch, which we've been talking about. Launch Complex 39D at Kennedy. This is an uncrewed Orion spacecraft that will launch on its first test flight. Mission known as Artemis One will place the Orion spacecraft into orbit around the moon before the capsule returns to Earth for splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. There's also 10 small CubeSat rideshare payloads, which also launch on the Artemis One mission. On September 4th and 5th, overnight, there'll be a Falcon 9 Starlink 4-20 mission and Sherpa LTC-2. This will launch from SLC-40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Florida. There'll be another batch of Internet satellites. This mission will also expect to launch the space flight's propulsive Sherpa LTC-2 space tug. Climb into a higher orbit with Boeing's Varuna technology demonstration mission, a pathfinder for the planned constellation of broadband satellites. On April 6th, there'll be an Ariane 5 launch from Kourou, French Guiana on ELA-3. The Ariane 5 ECA rocket, designated VA-258, will launch the Eutelsat Connect VHTS communication satellite. In mid-September, we will have a Falcon 9 Starlink 4-2 with Blue Walker 3. That's from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy. This rocket will launch with another batch of Starlink Internet satellites. Blue Walker 3 test satellite for AST Space Mobile's planned space-based cellular broadband network is a rideshare payload on this mission. Next up, September 11th, there will be a multi-payload called Alpha. The Alpha Firefly rocket will launch on its second test flight from Vandenberg Space Force Base. Rideshare payload consisting of multiple unspecified small satellites. September, Delta IV Heavy and Roll 91 will launch from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. This Delta IV Heavy will launch a classified payload for the National Reconnaissance Office. Then to be determined, just a couple more here, we've got Starship, orbital test flight from Starbase Boca Chica Beach, Texas. This will be the Super Heavy Starship launch vehicle, will launch on its first orbital test flight. The mission will attempt to travel around the world for nearly one full orbit, resulting in a re-entry and splashdown of the Starship near Hawaii. And then finally, September 21st, a Soyuz ISS mission from Baikonur Cosmodrome, Kazakhstan. This Russian government Soyuz rocket will launch the crewed Soyuz MS-22 spacecraft to the International Space Station with the next team of 3 cosmonauts and astronauts to live and work in the complex. The crew is led by Commander Sergei Prokofiev, who will be joined by Russian flight engineer Dmitry Petelkin and NASA astronaut Frank Rubino. The rocket will fly in the Soyuz 2.1A configuration. And that's it from me. Back to net control, KE5ICS.
That's great. Thanks very much, Tom. This is KF5PDS, Billy, your net control for this session of the DARC Skynet. All right, next up is recent astronomical discoveries. Oh, and I see, Tom, it says you'll be reading this segment tonight as well. So you could have just gone right on ahead with the next report. So again, I will return it to you for recent astronomical discoveries. So again, to KE5ICX from KF5PDS.
Yeah, I know. Well, Brenda is out of pocket this evening, does not have a radio, so she asked me to do this. But, you know, I get into a habit here. Let's see. 10:18, we got time. All right, here it is. Is an extrasolar world covered in water. An exoplanet is slightly greater in size and mass than Earth. And where its temperature would exist on its surface. Astronomers believe it could be an ocean planet. This one, a planet completely covered by a thick layer of water similar to one of Jupiter's or Saturn's moons. And this is TOI 1452b, an exoplanet orbiting one of 2 stars in the binary system located in the Draco constellation about 100 light years away. In the article published today at Astronomical Journal, Cadu and his team described the observations that elucidated the nature, characteristics of this unique exoplanet. He says, I'm extremely proud of this discovery because it shows the high caliber of our researchers and instrumentation, said René Dayan, Université de Montréal professor and director of IREX and the Observatoire du Montemagnet, OMM. It is thanks to the OMM, a special instrument designed in our labs called SPI-ROU, and an innovative analytic method developed for our research team that we're able to detect this one-of-a-kind exoplanet. With NASA's Space Telescope TESS, TESS, which surveys the entire sky in search of planetary systems close to our own. That put the researchers on the trail of this exoplanet. Based on the test signal, which showed a slight decrease in brightness every 11 days, astronomers predicted a planet about 70% larger than Earth. Charles Cardot belongs to a group of astronomers that does ground follow-up observations of candidates identified by TESS in order to confirm their planet type and characteristics. He used TESTO on the OMM telescope that was developed by the Université of Montréal. Professor David Lafrontière and his PhD student Francois René Lapochelle did the work. The OMM played a crucial role in confirming the nature of this signal and estimating the planet's radius, explained Cardot. There is no routine check. We had to make sure the signal detected by TESS was really caused by an exoplanet circling TOI 1452. The largest of the 2 stars in the binary system. The host star, TOI 1452, is much smaller than our Sun, as one of 2 stars of similar size in the binary system. The two stars orbit each other and are separated by a small distance. 97 astronomical units, or 2.5 times the distance between the Sun and Pluto. That the telescope sees them as a single point of light. The Pesto's resolution is high enough to distinguish the two planets, and the images showed that the exoplanet does orbit TOI 1452, which is confirmed through subsequent observations by a Japanese team. And let me skip down. The exoplanet TOI 1452 is probably rocky like Earth, but its radius, mass, and density suggest the world very different from our own. Earth is essentially a very dry planet, even though we sometimes call it the blue planet, because of about 70% of its surface is covered by an ocean. Water actually only makes up a negligible fraction of its mass, less than 1%. Water may be much more abundant on some exoplanets. In recent years, astronomers have identified and determined the radius and mass of many exoplanets with a size between that of Earth and Neptune, or 3.8 times larger than Earth. Some of these planets have a density that can only be explained from a large fraction of their mass is made up of lighter materials than those that make up the internal structure of Earth, such as water. These hypothetical worlds would be dubbed ocean planets. Exoplanet such as TOI 1452b is a perfect candidate for further observation with the James Webb Space Telescope, or Webb for short. It is one of the few known temperate planets that exhibit characteristics consistent with an ocean planet. It is close enough to Earth that researchers can hope to study its atmosphere and test this hypothesis. And in a stroke of good fortune, it is located in a region of the sky that the telescope can observe year-round. Our observations with the Webb telescope will be essential in better understanding TOI 1452b, said Dayon, who overviewed the conception of James Webb's component NIRSS. As soon as we can, we will book time on the Webb to observe this strange and wonderful world. This comes from Science Daily. There's the complete article located there and available to you. It was published here on August 24th, 2022. Let's see. Do you want me to go ahead and do visible satellite passages? Because I've got that one too.
Affirmative. Go for it, Tom. You have the net. Go ahead and finish that category out. So this is to KE5ICX from KF5PDS.
All right, very good. I didn't want to get in trouble with net control, so here we go. Visible satellite passages over the next few days. The International Space Station has no favorable passes that I will mention tonight. However, Tiangong, the Chinese space station, does have several passes, which are not bad. We have August 27th. That would be this evening, 11:10, 9. Oh, it's too late. Let's go to August 28th. My apologies. We have a minus 2.1 magnitude. It's at 20:35 in the evening on the west-northwest, reaches highest point at 20:38 at 71 degrees, and it will fall to the south-southeast at 14 degrees at 20:41. And the following, let's see here, next is the X-37B. Hang on, I need two hands. Sorry about that. I missed my foot pedal this evening. So let's see, the X-37B has on September 4th a nice launch, a nice pass, 0.2 magnitude, 20:45 in the evening out of the northwest, reaches its highest point at 79 degrees at 20:48, and it falls to 20:49 at 29 degrees at the east-southeast. Finally, ENVISAT, the Earth observation satellite, which has been out of commission for a while, but it's gigantic, so it gives a nice footprint and easy to see. We have on August 29th a, let's see here, whoops, let's do, sorry about that, let me do one. We'll do September 4th. Apparently, I'm looking, I wonder why I have these other ones. Oh well, September at 20:45 in the evening out of the northwest. It's a polar satellite, so from the north to the south. It'll reach its highest point at 2048 at 79 degrees at the northeast, and it'll fall to the east-southeast at 2049 at 29 degrees. So that's a very good pass. That was September 4th. All right, well, I guess that's it. I thought I had a few more good passes, but somehow or another they don't seem all that great now that I look at them. Anyhow, back to net control, I guess. This is KE5ICX.
Great. Thank you very much, Tom. And you can go to heavens-above.com and put in your location, and you can see all the great flyover information, just like what Tom went through there in that last segment. All right, next up is Astronomical Q&A. John, KF5JDW, I saw in the chat window that you had a question, so sorry I didn't get to that earlier, but I see several folks are putting up information for you in the chat. I just wanted to check in and see if you were getting the answer to your question. If not, you're welcome to come over the air and ask your question and see if we can get an on-air response. So KF5JDW, just wanted to check and see, are you getting the answer to your question in the chat? If not, please come now with your call sign. We'll be glad to take your question on air.
Thanks, Billy. Appreciate it. Actually, I was going to wait till another Skynet. I didn't want to hold this up, but as long as you got me. I know the solar wind, actually the effect of the solar wind keeps getting extended, but I noticed Voyager 1 is still returning on the Deep Sky Network. They're still returning a solar wind number. So apparently there's still solar wind on it. I was just curious what Chaz had to say about that. I thought pretty much before it was kind of beyond the accepted end or reach of the solar wind. That's kind of my question.
I'm completely operational, and all my circuits are functioning perfectly. Afterglow Movie Net.
Excellent question, John. Chaz, KF5JHA, do you have an answer to John's question? If so, feel free to go ahead and answer him.
This short and sweet. How far out does the solar wind extend? That's a great question. It could be halfway to the nearest star or stars. We don't know how big the forces are from the other stars that are surrounding us, so our solar wind could go out much further than had been predicted in the past. So how far out? It depends probably in part on how strong our solar wind is and how far it goes up depending on the sun's energy. So it's kind of interesting that it could vary in distance depending on the direction and the other sources that are surrounding us. That's the simple answer. Bill has posted a couple of things that you can research online for websites. So if you're on Echolink, you can go to the websites that he had posted that are JPL. I hope that answered your question, John. We can get into that another time. We're in 5 JHA, back to our net control.
Great, thank you. And yes, we are at the end of our net. Tom, KE5ICX, can you give me a count of how many hands we have participating on the air this evening?
Yes, Miss Billy, we got 24 check-ins this evening, KE5ICX.
Okay, affirmative. I copied it. Tonight we had 24 hams participating on the air, so thank you to all who checked in this evening. We hope you'll join us here next week and every Saturday night at 9 p.m. to discuss astronomy, space, and space exploration. On this net, the sky is never the limit. We're always looking for net control stations for this and all the other DARC nets. If you would like to try your hand at this, contact any of the net controls by sending an email to nets@w5fc.org. You can follow topics and discussion about this net and astronomy in general on Facebook and Twitter, as well as our audio and video streams, video archives, and other useful internet resources by going to w5fc.org at the conclusion of this net. So until next Saturday night, this is KF5PDS, Billy, and I'll be closing the net at 22:32 local time and returning the repeater to normal amateur use. 7-3, everybody, and enjoy the evening discovering the universe. And stay tuned. In just a few minutes, we'll begin the Afterglow movie net, where tonight's discussion will be 1952's Red Planet Mars. 7-3, everybody.
Thank you, Billy, and thank you for doing a great job as net control this evening. This is KE5ICX. We're going to take about a 5-minute break. Go do the things you need to do. We will be coming back in 5 minutes to discuss the movie Red Planet Mars, Red Planet Mars from 1952, a very unusual and very different film from the 1950s. 5 minutes, we'll be back. KE5ICX. now time for the Afterglow Movie Net. What is the Afterglow Movie Net? Well, most of you know, but some of you may not. We talk about a movie. We assign a movie 1 week in advance, actually Sunday morning. However, you get to find out about it on Saturday evening after the current Afterglow Movie Net, and then you got 1 week to watch the film. This week's film is called Red Planet Mars from 1952. Now, the purpose, what we will do is we'll discuss, perhaps build up or tear down this fine film from 1952. In it, we'll discuss the plot, then we'll discuss characterization. Then after that, we will discuss special sound, music, I don't know, whatever you want to talk about. That's kind of the free-for-all round. So the first thing I would do is I'm going to go through the plot, and then after that I'm going to take a check-in. I'm going to ask you for your call sign, your name, and did you see the film? Now, it is not a requirement that you actually see this film in order to participate in the discussion. We can always find something to discuss that is similar to, in this case, tonight's movie, Red Planet Mars. So you'll have an opportunity to say something about, I don't know, what we find out about this film. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read you the plot as it appears on Wikipedia, because they're the ones that seem to have the best and most complete description of this film. So here we go. An American astronomer obtains images of Mars suggesting large-scale environmental changes are occurring at a pace that can only be accomplished by intelligent beings with advanced technology. Scientist Chris Cronin, played by Peter Graves, and his wife Linda, who is played by Andrea King, have been contacting Mars by hydrogen-powered radio transmitter using technology based on the work of Nazi scientist Franz Calder. They communicate first through an exchange of mathematical concepts like the value of pi, and then through answers to specific questions about Martian life. The transmissions claim that Mars is a utopia, which has led to great technological advancement and the elimination of scarcity, but there is no fear of nuclear war. This revelation leads to political and economic chaos, especially in the Western Hemisphere. It is said to have done more to smash the democratic world in the last 4 weeks than the Russians have been able to do in 11 years. The U.S. government imposes news blackout and orders the transmissions to stop. It appears the Soviet Union to pick up and code their messages. This ends when the next message reveals that Earth is condemned to a constant fear of nuclear war as a for staying from the teachings of the Bible. Revelation sweeps the globe, including the Soviet Union, which is overthrown and replaced by a theocracy, which is met with celebration in America. The messages cease. Calder, armed with a handgun, confronts the Cronins in their lab. He wants to announce that he has been duping the world with false messages from a secret Soviet-funded radio transmitter in the high Andes Mountains of South America. The transmitter was destroyed by an avalanche. There's been no transmission since then. But Linda raises the question of the religious messages Calder is contemptuous. He says that he transmitted the original messages supposedly from Mars, but that the United States government made up the religious messages, which he allowed because he wanted to see the destruction of the Soviet Union. The Cronins know that the religious messages were not hoaxes, but Calder claimed to be believed, and it would mean disaster for the now peaceful Earth. Unseen by Calder, Chris opens the valve to the hydrogen supply and tells Linda to leave. Calder refuses to allow it. She asks her husband for a cigarette. He says quietly that in their years together he has never seen her smoke. They both know the spark will ignite the hydrogen and destroy the lab. But before Chris can use his lighter, a message begins to come through, and the spark will ignite the hydrogen and destroy the lab. Oh, wait a minute. But before Chris can use his lighter, a message begins to come through, and an enraged Calder into the screen, blowing up the transmitter himself and the Cronins before the message is complete. However, the first part is decoded, and later the president reads it out loud to the world. Quote, you have done well, my good, the rest evoking the parable of the talents in the Gospel of Matthew. You have done well, my good and faithful servant. I told you it would be this strange, but it was distributed by United Artists, and it was, starred Peter Graves. Everybody knows Mr. Mission Impossible, so how bad could it be? Let's see. I'll just read this one line. It says, when the film was released, the staff at Variety liked the film, writing, despite its title, Red Planet Mars takes place on terra firma, sans spaceships, cosmic rays, or space cadets. It is a fantastic concoction delving into the realms of science, politics, religion, world affairs, and communism. Despite the hokum dished out, the actors concerned turn in credible performances. I thought that was kind of interesting. Okay, well, you've got the warm-up. You know what the story is, and it's got a little bit of everything in it. So let's get started. I will take check-ins. If you would like to join us, please come now with your call sign, your name, and did you see the movie Red Planet Mars from 1952? Please come now.
This is Kilo India 5, Juliet, Charlie Mike, Thomas, and Euless. Yes, I have seen the movie, but it was actually many years ago. But boy, I recognize that plot. KI5JCM.
November Victor 5 Foxtrot, Virginia. I did see the movie.
November 5 Bravo Bravo, Bill and Irving. Yes, I did see the movie.
Kilo 0 Foxtrot Echo Romeo, Chris in Southeast Dallas. Yes, I did see the movie.
Kilo Golf 5 Bravo Zoo Whiskey. Jay near Weber, I just did it film.
Kilo India 5, Sierra X-Ray Echo, Brandon. I did see the film.
All right, let me get those folks checked in. I've got KI5JCM. Thomas and Euless, he saw the movie long ago, but he recognized the plot. This should be interesting. Quite amazing myself. NV5F, that's Virginia. Yes, she saw the film. N5BB, Bill and Irving. Yep, he saw the film. Next up was Chris in Dallas. I had a brain lock. Would you give me your call again? I guess the 0 just kind of messed me up.
Kilo 0 Foxtrot Echo Romeo, Chris.
Thank you. Kilo 0 Foxtrot Echo Romeo. That's Chris in Dallas. Yes, he saw the film. KG5BZW, J near Weatherford. Not in Weatherford, but near Weatherford. Yep, he saw the film. KI5SXE, that's Brandon. Yes, he saw the film. Any additional check-ins, please come out.
Kilo India 5, Kilo Whiskey Golf, Cruise in Arlington.
Hey, last but certainly not least is Cruise, KI5KWG in Arlington. I'm pretty sure you saw the movie, but I'm going to confirm. Did you see the movie?
Affirmative, Tom. I sure did. KI5, KWG. Yes, I saw the movie. Back to you, Tom.
Excellent. I kind of figured you did, but I had to ask because I had to ask everybody else. Anyone else who wants to join us? We're going to be talking about the movie Red Planet Mars from 1952. If you'd like to join us, whether you saw the movie or not, doesn't matter. Come with your call sign, your name, and did you see the film? Right, well, I think we've got our usual suspects here. I checked Echolink, and I think everybody who is interested is already checked in. Romy's out there. Let me ask, N8WWR, are you just left over from your net duties earlier, or would you like to check in this evening? Okay, I think he's wandered off. That's fine. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. I generally just kind of pick the order when I do net control. Since everybody checked in such a quick and enthusiastic manner, we will go down the list in the order that you guys were checked in. So we're going to start with Thomas, KI5JCM, over in Euless. Thomas, what are your thoughts about the plot? You remember the film quite vividly, I guess. Tell us what you thought about it from KE5ICX.
I love how religion defeated evil of the Soviet Union. I still remember the scene where the church patriarch in hiding comes out, opens the new religious icons, and they walk right into the Politburo, or I think it's the Kremlin, and it all just comes crumbling down. Given, I know quite a bit about the church and everything they did to it. I don't know, that's always resonated with me. There's a quote that's somewhat apocryphal about Stalin talking about that in order to corrupt America, or to bring America into the global communism, they first have to disrupt our morality and our spirituality. So, I don't know. I'm a devout Christian at heart. Yes, the movie was a little over-dramatic at points, but I actually enjoyed it. I think I saw it under a different name. I honestly don't remember if I rented the video or caught it on cable late one night, but I do remember it well, and it was kind of cool. And I like the fact they left a few things to question, and I rather liked the ending. I thought they gave everyone a really good death, and I'm okay with you killing off main characters, but it's got to be a good and meaningful death, and I thought they did it well. Other than that, not much to say. KI5JCM, back to net control.
Very good, Thomas, and thank you for your comments. Yeah, it came as a surprise. I'm not going to add a lot of comments, but watching this film, it was completely different than what I was expecting. That's always kind of nice. In a good way. Message heavy towards the end, but that's okay. That was what it was playing off of. And this thing was originally a play produced and then converted or made into a movie. Next up is NV5F, Virginia. You saw the film. What did you think about the plot for Red Planet Mars from KE5ICX?
KE5ICX in the net. This is NV5F. Well, I actually jumped in because I wanted to talk about the plot, kind of without any influence from anybody else, and I thought that it was, it's like you said, I thought it was going to be a little more science fiction-y. I found the just general quality of it to be pretty good. It had some twists in it, and there were a couple things I kind of saw coming. The times, it very much suited the times in which it took place, and I liked the kind of over-the-top technology stuff with the hydrogen valve, and of course I love any kind of funny things about radio, and I thought it was a little bit over the top to have the messages from Mars eliciting such an instant reaction from the whole planet Earth, like oh, we've had vision, on Mars for 300 years. and then all of a sudden everybody on Earth decides, well, we can't use fossil fuels anymore. I didn't quite get why they thought, I mean, there was nothing to indicate that the Martians were going to send their technology down to us. So I thought that some of the reactions of the population at large were pretty extreme, and I thought that that it seemed really fishy. And I kind of felt like, well, the Russians are behind this, and the guy with the radio in South America must be sending missions. But then it kind of makes it clear at the end that it's kind of one of those, well, what really is going on, and what part did he actually play in it? I thought them coming up with a vocabulary to send such complicated messages so quickly was kind of unbelievable. But that happens in movies a lot. This actually kind of reminded me of almost like the movie Contact kind of ripped it off in places, but it's not really a new plot. It also reminded me a little bit of something that I might have seen in a graduate class on propaganda that I took, where we had to watch a bunch of movies that were along these lines. And this was a very anti-communist kind of thing, and I, like Thomas, am a believer, and I actually honestly do think that a lot of the problems in our society in the United States are due to kicking the Lord God out of a lot of places in this country. It's almost like Russia didn't have to do it. We kind of have done it to ourselves. They might have had a hand in it. I don't know. I'm sure there's some people that think that. Anyway, I did like that aspect of it, that the wife, I think her name was Linda, she was very fearful at first of her husband's discovery, and she was afraid for her children, and I kind of resonated with her general attitude at the beginning of the movie here at the beginning of the 21st century. I'm pretty apprehensive and feel pretty kind of just left out there on my own in a lot of ways. So that actually kind of resonated with me some. I almost had a visceral reaction, to how she was feeling, and then the hope that everybody felt when they started getting the messages from on high, so to speak. And I did like that. It was a little extreme, but it was also definitely indicative of the times when the U.S. at large was, a lot more on that page, of responding to something like that. And I'm sure whoever wrote this it was a cautionary message, and I think it was a pretty effective one. The ending of the sacrifice that the parents were going to make, and then they didn't have to because the bad guy basically did the whole thing for them. That was kind of a downer. I especially was sad for their kids at the end. They tried to make that sort of a hopeful thing, like your parents are the ones who, sealed the deal for the world to be a better place. But at the same time, that the end was a little bit rough, I thought. I also have to throw in that I love that he was sending messages in some form of Morse code on a semi-automatic, like vibroflex keyer that he just kind of clacked randomly on the desk. I just thought that was pretty great too. So I just love anything with radio. And the big hydrogen tank in the lab was pretty awesome too. So anyway, I won't talk anymore. I could talk forever, and I'm sure other people will expound upon things I did not have time to talk about. So back to net in D5S.
All right, thank you, Virginia, and I wrote some notes on your notes, so very good, very detailed comments. I like that. Next up is Bill, N5BB. Bill, your thoughts on the plot for Red Planet Mars from 1952.
Hey, this is N5BB. Well, it's interesting listening to the comments so far. Some of what Virginia said I agree with, but not all of it. Now, there's several kind of odd things about this movie. The one which is most problematic for me is that at the end of the movie, we don't know the truth. Why? Well, remember, right before the explosion at the end, the Dr. What is his name? Oh, I've got it written down here somewhere. Calder, Dr. Calder. Franz Calder. He, the one that escaped from the radio transmitter site in the Andes, of all places, that was destroyed in an avalanche. He gave pretty convincing evidence that it was all a ruse. In other words, there were no Martians, no communications from Mars. He made it all up. He said all those messages, he had them in his book. So, then at the very, very right, just right near the end, another message comes in. And then the movie ends. And it appeared to me that all the details about the hydrogen tube were destroyed. The developer and the user, they're all gone. Along with the laboratory, and all the hydrogen tubes are destroyed in both locations, both the one in the Alps and the one there in the United States. So, as Virginia, I believe, said, and I didn't see any evidence that there was any technology actually transferred to the Earth. To see anything about anything being built or any detailed plans? No. There were short statements about the average life is 300 years. We get our power from cosmic rays, and that was it. As far as I could see, there was nothing else. Because you remember, everything that they received was sent, except for that one little short message at the very end as the thing was closing. Everything else was sent by Dr. Calder. And he made it up. It was in his little notebook. It was very short. So I didn't understand how these short messages, supposedly from Mars, were going to cause the public to think everything was going to change. You know, it's like somebody says, I saw a UFO, and they told me all those things they listed. They were all they're going to tell us about living 300 years, about power from indefinite amount of power from cosmic rays, and there's not going to be any war and some other things. It's just a statement. There's no proof of that. There's no show me the truth. There's no truth. So that's the big thing that bothered me. This is social media. You know, what this, as Virginia said, it was all like propaganda, like the Russian propaganda. And why in the world anybody was believing that, I do not know. It was mass hysteria. So that's one thing I found extremely odd. Like Virginia, the use of the mechanical bug and him sitting there randomly flapping around on it, why did he think he could make somebody on Mars understand that? How did he think of frequency? How did he think they could understand it? The signals he was receiving from them, just these flashes on a CRT that were in, they weren't even Morse code, they were just numbers of lines. I didn't understand that at all. Didn't understand how in the world they could communicate things about lifespan and cosmic rays from those little flashes. It wasn't like the Carl Sagan movie story where they spent a long, long time trying to decode everything. No, it was like immediate. I didn't believe any of that. So even though the high-level idea of this movie might have been reasonable, implementation of the screenplay, to me, didn't make any sense at all. He was talking about sound being converted to light going to Mars. What did sound have to do with this? And there were lots of other things which were the economy collapsing, just completely impossible to happen from that little amount of events. Mass hysteria. So I was bothered by the high-level plot may have been okay, but the screenplay implementation, I didn't believe any of it. That's all I got inside BB.
Very good. Thank you, Bill. I wrote some more notes off of you, too, so I got double the notes. K0FER, Chris in Dallas. You saw it. What did you think of the plot from KE5ICX?
I will give it a qualified thumbs up. Like Bill said, there are some things that really strain our credulity in there, but there were some things that I like the idea of what kind of disruptions would a sudden influx of technology cause to our economy, to our way of thinking, things like that. I liked the characterization overall. I thought everybody's motives felt well, so I thought it was pretty well written. And the people, the playwrights, Balderston and Weiler, are both very accomplished. Like Balderston is responsible for the rise of Bela Lugosi of Dracula fame, and Weiler has a couple of Oscar nods to his credit. Interesting, he does have a background in propaganda. He worked with the War Office to create as a propagandist during World War II for the Allies. But things kind of just went a little off the rails for me when it got to the Our Father, which art a Martian, Marvin be thy name portion. I, like many here, am a believer, but I get uncomfortable when religion starts getting mixed with politics, or somehow extolling a theocracy is a good thing. I think we have plenty of examples in current and ancient history of why that's generally not a good way to go. This divine argument against communism, capitalism good, and approved by God, communism bad because they are anti-religion, doesn't really need to be made. I think you can just point to, hey, they're killing their people. That's enough to say communism bad. Also, it kind of felt like at the very end there was an anti-technology message. Like we should not strive to be to look higher than what we've got. Like they've made all these conversations with Mars, and then they're suddenly going to stop. They got God to talk back to them for the first time in 2,000 years, and they're going to stop. That does not make sense on a religious level or any sort of practical level, especially if you're going to try to call for some sort of divine anointment of your political and economic leaders. That was the part that really just kind of made no sense to me. Why on earth would they stop? Why would they not try again? They had the valve, the hydrogen valve, that was government property. I doubt that Cronin had the one and only copy of that. Also, the naming it's a little on the nose. I mean, Chris, the Christ figure in the show, sacrificed himself to bring the message of Martian God to people on Earth. And Kronen, meaning crown, in like Dutch, German, and a few other things. And you have the villain, Calder, this. They make it very, very clear that he has a satanic purpose, all but evoking Lucifer. Anyway, that's my thoughts on things. KZRFER.
Thank you, Chris, and more good comments. Maybe this film was, I don't know if it's better or worse, but it certainly has evoked a lot of conversation. Next up is KG5BZW. Jay, near Weatherford. Jay, your thoughts on the plot for tonight's movie, Red Planet Mars from 1952. KE5ICX.
Good evening, Tom, and everybody else on that. This is KG5BZW on that link. First, I must address something that doesn't seem to have been addressed, but I will say, and we, the Afterglow, had this film on in July 13th, I believe, 2019. So if somebody's wondering why it might be familiar, well, that is possibly the reason. But anyway, so I know I've seen this twice because I actually kind of remembered that, but I couldn't remember when exactly it was. So anyway, yeah, I'm with Bill on this. Some of the high level stuff is kind of interesting to think about, but the way it was written, especially if you think about it in the end, it doesn't really make sense because, well, aspects didn't make sense at the beginning, but in just evaluating from the totality of it, because so much happened in this film because of the prospect of, we're gonna, we're gonna have all this basically really cheap energy, and life is gonna be extended to 300 years or something maybe, and all of that, and then all of a sudden the only thing that you get out of it is supposed united world. But what are they united over? Well, I don't know, because it's like I don't know. Like Bill said, I don't know that there's anything communicated that like how these extensions, these improvements have been made, so that and all that stuff, all that happened for, like, what real reason? I mean, it didn't really make sense at the beginning, because it was just, say you're told of somebody's found this new way to, well, let's just use aluminum as an example, because in the 18th century it was really expensive to produce. And now it's really cheap to create from more. So, but what does it matter if somebody has discovered it if it's not in utilization yet? You're not going to immediately have the value of aluminum stock immediately decrease just because somebody's discovered something. It actually has to be used, and there actually has to be the stock actually has to go produced in great supplies for all that the market that actually worked here. So that whole aspect just did not make sense. I mean, and twofold, because I mean, they clumsily wrapped it up and say, oh, yeah, everybody's united, and yeah, and that's it, that's all. Whatever that's supposed to mean. I will say, oh shoot, I forgot the last guy's name. I'm like, theocracies have generally not been noted to be good, as in a weird term, because of Russia's abhorrence of any religion besides the state religion. I have to admit, there is a kind of thing like to have some sort of different government that's based on something antithetical. There's a sweet bit of revenge to that, I guess. Whether or not it's going to be, as pure and holy as we're supposed to believe, I kind of have, it's Hollywood magic versus real world here. That's probably, I mean, how many Roman popes have been, corrupt? We had the corruption between government leadership in Rome and what the Roman Pope is actually supposed to do. There's just this big mix that just really just messed with a lot of things back in European history. And I haven't really addressed everything on the plot, but I think I've addressed the main things. I guess the other thing the number communication bit. All of our files are in binary. It's 10,000 view level. It could work with a little bit more work than what they started with, but of course there's the decimal versus they somehow assumed that the aliens understood decimal. Well, that's a really bad assumption as well. I mean, we could have transmitted pi and base, let's say base 60. That's a interesting, often, well, not that often, but that has been used in in certain ethnic groups. Anyway, whatever. I remember there's Jewish. Seems they had a base 60 count system at one point, or was it 360? I don't know. It included. It could be divided by 3. However, it was kind of interesting. And my memory is very faulty. But how would you recognize pi as expressed in base 60? I don't know. I mean, there's so many bases you could start with. They kind of that's another bit of magic there that kind of it ticked me off the first time I saw it, and ticked me off now. I could probably say other things, but I think that I better shut up. So I'll end it at that. KG5BDW, back to net.
Okay, thank you, Jay. And I managed to get some comments off from you, too. This is a good one. Next up is Brandon, KI5SXE. Brandon, your thoughts on the plot for Red Planet Mars from 1952, KE5I6.
Well, I thought I looked at it with some fresh eyes, and there was a lot of possibility with the plot, a lot of plot branches throughout the movie, so I didn't really know where the movie was going. So I liked the plot twist towards the end. I kind of liked those, different possibilities. And then I thought they kind of finally resolved it pretty well with like a kumbaya wrap-up, all was well with the world, and everybody was at peace. So a couple things that were kind of throwing me for a loop with the plot were, how do you really explain the Mars imagery at the beginning of the movie? I think it tries to tie the movie into, or tie in inside of the movie, the fact that you have to remember that you're talking to Mars at the end, or you could forget that you're speaking to Mars people and think that the God entity is in the ether or in space somewhere, and they're just pulling out the signal and being spoken to from the heavens above, and not from Mars specifically. So I thought that was kind of interesting as, twist slash, maybe a contrivance of the plot to make it fit at the end. But all around, I think the movie was good. I didn't have anything bad to say about how it left me feeling in the end. This is KI5SXE, back to net.
Very good. Thank you for that, Brandon. And I wrote some notes from you, too. Next up is KI5KWG. That's Cruz over in Arlington. He did see the film. What are your thoughts on the plot, Cruz?
KI5KWG. Wow. I want to scratch out all my notes and think about what Brandon just said. It did not occur to me that maybe it wasn't the U.S. government. It certainly wasn't the Nazi. And maybe it wasn't Martians. I hadn't thought of that. Wow. Pretty cool thought. What I wrote down is that I thought it was maybe a ham-fisted, pardon, I couldn't resist, presentation. But I was really fascinated with the thought, because I've had this thought before, is why do we always assume the aliens, one, they never have any morality? Well, this one, they did, apparently. And two, it's always about the technology, but we never explore, for lack of a better term, humanity or its equivalent. We don't consider their philosophy, their theology, the psychology of those creatures, if they're not exactly human like us, which I had taken this movie to kind of presume that they were. So I was very pleased to finally run across where we've done this. Virginia mentioned contact connection, but Sagan really didn't go there much in his book. Yeah, although he went more in the book than he did in that film, I think. Let me reset for a second. That's better. And I had another thought also besides the contact book. Quick comment on the contact. In the book, Sagan's book, there's a long section about how they're printing out the ones and zeros, I think, from the signal being received. And when they pulled out the printer paper, he marveled that there was a perfect circle in zeros, maybe amongst a bunch of ones or the other way around. And one line going from the center of that giant circle fitting perfectly on a page, which you go, that's a miracle in itself. And Sagan kind of pushed that thought, is that there's something miraculous about what we're receiving. And I think Sagan was looking for God. Whether he found him or not, I don't know. But at any rate, another recent novel called The Apollo Murders by the real Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield. I think it's his first novel. And the Russian Orthodox Church played a role in that as well in the story. So all of those thoughts were kind of on my mind, and I've often wondered, why do we have to assume, one, aliens never have morals, and two, that they're always going to be superior in all aspects to us. And I thought in this case, they kind of leveled that playing field some, and I liked that concept. That's about all I have. A couple of things that I was looking at listening to the other comments was that if the U.S. government had actually been sending those messages, then they would not have known that the message was broken when the hydrogen exploded in there in the lab. So I think that kind of pushed the viewer, the audience, to assume these really were legit, the religious part of the messages. But the flip side of that for the plot hole is that it seemed to me, I'd have to go back and watch it again, that the messages seem to have been aware of the fake messages sent by the Nazis. So there's my plot hole. I may be wrong on that, but that was how I took it. And I think that's what I've got on the plot, and this is KI5KWG, back to net.
All right, thank you, Cruz. Thank you for those comments. I have a number of, I don't know if I can comment on all of them, but I got about 2 pages of notes just from the people who've already, seven of you that have brought information. Oh, by the way, Brenda is listening in. She does not have a radio, but she found us on YouTube, so she's listening in, and I get a couple of comments back. Brenda, if you want to type something in, I'll be happy to pass that along. She's on the chat over here on Facebook. Okay, anyone else like to check in before I give my comments? Anybody who'd like to join us? Tonight's movie is called Red Planet Mars from 1952, a very unusual, almost non-science fiction, science fiction film. If you'd like to join us, please come now with your call sign, your name, and did you see this film?
So, Bravo 9, Sierra Oscar Kilo, Sean in Fort Worth. Yes, I've seen the movie.
I think all but Brenda, the usual suspects, have checked in. KB9SOK, Sean, welcome back. You saw the film. What did you think about the plot for Red Planet Mars?
This is KB9SOK. Well, I think the notes that I took, I think it was Brandon nailed it on the head for me, because I had the exact same thought, because they had this big scene at the beginning showing this massive change on Mars in just a week's time, and then they never really explain any of that as we go through the movie. So there at the end, I had the same thought. It's like, okay, did the final messages come from Mars, the aliens, or did it come from God in space? Or are they trying to say that God lives on Mars? So maybe the movie title should have been God Lives on Mars, and that's an experimental area. So which message were they trying to relay there? So that's, and I think they were trying to say that it wasn't the Martians responding at the end. That's just kind of how I took it. But that was my big note that I wrote down as well. So I think that's an interesting thought. But overall, I found the movie kind of crazy. Really, it was extremes. Everybody was at different levels of extremes all the time. It's either they were super calm or they were extremely upset. The scene at the beginning where, the mom just explodes and then all at once she's fine. And then later the dad just all once out of nowhere explodes and he's fine. And then we had the Russian, scientist that was fine. Then he, same deal. It's like extremes. probably the most calmest and smartest person in this film, I thought, was actually the son that came up with the pi thing. Scientists have long speculated, if we ever did actually get that opportunity to speak to an alien life form, that probably mathematics would be our best way to go about doing it. Now, the way they did it in the film, of course, as Bill brought up, was totally ridiculous. He pretended like he was doing Morse code, and then it was being converted to light, but then everything came back in television signals. So that whole thing was just absolutely ridiculous. That just didn't make any sense at all. And how quickly they went from basic math to full-fledged conversations seemed kind of extreme. And obviously, of course, we find out that it's the German guy that's sending the message at the beginning anyway. But still, it's just the method of transmission receiving just made no sense. And the fact that the U.S. and only the U.S. fell apart from just a simple message about power, or how you power things, it just seems ridiculous. If that would happen in just 2 weeks' time, I think people are quite a bit more intelligent than that. I don't. Now, there has been also a lot of speculation over the years that there would be some people that would maybe possibly kind of lose it if we ever did actually talk to aliens, because they would think that there is no God because of that. But everybody's got their own opinions on that as well. So, that doesn't make a lot of sense either. I don't think that would cause mass hysteria just because we finally talked to an intelligent life form that, okay, God no longer exists. That seems a little far-fetched for me as well. Just overall, it was parts of the movie was kind of interesting, but parts that were just kind of ridiculous and over the top, which kind of took away from what I think it could have been. So I'm kind of on the fence on this one. I can't say that I hated it, but I can't say I really, it's obviously, like I said, it almost seemed like a propaganda film, but definitely different. I will give it that. I think everything else was pretty well commented. So back to that. This is KB9SOK.
Thank you, Sean. I got to tell you, all very good comments about this film this evening. So I'm been cribbing off of all of you and kind of trying to figure out what my voice might be in all of this. But I was trying to think, how could you fix this plot? Obviously, there are holes that just cannot be filled. Some of them having to do with convincing the masses about, that these are messages actually coming from Mars. Someone mentioned, and quite rightly so, that there's no proof of anything. There's no technology that's actually been exchanged. Everybody is acting as though, wow, this is great. We have all these things. The economy is going to crash and governments fall, all on a comment. Now, if it's true that the two authors, or at least one of the authors, is involved in propaganda, then maybe this is the overarching thing, that you can destroy a society or you can destroy a nation state by simply putting out propaganda. But in this case, it's so far removed, and it's so difficult to even discuss. How would that be done? Distances alone would tell me we didn't see them come in flying saucers like in War of the Worlds. There was no threat there. The other thing, too, is that everybody seemed somewhat nonchalant about the fact that they had actually contacted aliens on Mars. That would have been a first contact. Now, yeah, they would have gotten more excited. They would maybe, people on Earth may have gotten more excited and worried, and that would have been perfectly fine, and isn't it? About Earth invasions or preparations for invasion, fine and dandy, but nothing happened. I don't know how much time had passed through this thing, but eventually somebody's got to say, nothing's happening. Wake up, sheeple. So, and of course the ending, which is, was it from God? Was God a Martian? Yeah, well, all those things kind of go through your head just before and after the explosion. But I was thinking, well, how would you do this better? And in some ways it has been done better in another way, and that would be that you have a Christ-like character who comes to Earth potentially, who provides this information, or it could be a Christ-like character that may be still on the radio but is actually a human, and they provide some sort of critical technology or something that would be accepted quite quickly. So I idea. What if you could, say, cure cancer, which is a threat to each and every person on this planet? What if you had a method that you came across, you're a scientist, and you find that you can completely put cancer to sleep for a while? Maybe not cure it, but for a while. And then, behind the mask, which is either radio or something like that, then you start making demands on society. Maybe that would be a better way of doing it. If you're a really smart guy, and a lot of scientists and doctors are, they might come up with a whole series of demands and throw things into a sort of chaos. That might have been a better or stronger story since we have no proof anything actually works. And then as this starts to fade, or they're called unwound, and the thing turns out really it is a cure, even though that it had a temporary setback. I don't know. Something along those lines. Trying to fix a flawed plot and do so would require some flawed thinking, I guess. But I was thinking those might be things that might fall into it. Now, there have been other films or other stories. Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, which has to do with an alien invasion, a benevolent one where they're given everything they could possibly want here on Earth. Everybody's happy. Everything works, but there's a plan. And it ends up with the demise of Earth as a way of bridging and expanding beyond. It's an interesting story, and I think this kind of falls somewhat at the primordial end of that storyline. If you want to, you can actually see that. It was a 3-part Sci-Fi Channel thing about, I think it was in 2015. You'll probably find it online or as a DVD or something like that. One of the things that was mentioned, too, that I thought was really interesting is can you bring down a society, whether it be a godless society or a God-fearing society or a society that is secular in some way, shape, or form? And I think the answer is yes, that's entirely possible. It depends on the will of the people. What is it they want? And in this case, they thought they wanted theology. That was, or some sort of religious experience. Well, not everybody buys into that, and I'm not sure that even if a major population does buy into it without coercion and suppression from others, a groupthink type of thing, as you might call it in like 1984, one of the societal things. It still requires you to make everyone comply. Otherwise, if people aren't believing in whatever it is you're offering, then they are contrarians and they are potentially going to not be happy with anything that you might do. Any of the breakoffs that you have from like Martin Luther in Christianity and Islam and many factions that have come out of that. This is just a natural thing. Everyone finds their own direction. So unity on Earth with a single religion or one in a particular country or whatever, I don't think it's going to last long because the liberties and ideas of man has a tendency to cause those things to diverge and divest in a group setting. I'm looking through my notes here to see everybody really covered most of it. Let's see. Yeah, I think I pretty much covered it. I wrote down binary beliefs. It's either this or that. In the whole storyline was, and that does play out. I'll just say this: binary beliefs don't last very long because, as I mentioned in the previous little section, it can't be either this or that. A lot of people think in terms of a continuous stream, and we change our basic ideas as we grow older, and we are influenced by others. So I can't imagine keeping everything exactly the same. I also found that, well, I was never enamored with the Soviet society. society, and it was pretty terrible, as were the Nazis. I don't think that they could just simply wipe out people and nobody noticed. Yes, it does happen in remote areas, but this is like right in Moscow. I just can't see that happening. I could be wrong. That's just a guess on my part, although some extraordinary things have happened through the years and even in the past few months that defy description. So, all right, I've said enough on all of that. I'll go ahead and let's go to the next section, which at this point would be talking about characterizations. How did our characters fare through all of this? And was it believable? Were our actors acting in the best interest of their audiences? Were they believable? So we're going to start at the top. That's KI5JCM. Thomas, what did you think about characterization and maybe the acting in this particular film from KE5ICX? Oh, could be people are starting to fall out. It is getting late. I did get a nap, though, myself, so I can stay awake a while longer. KF5JCF. Thomas, are you there? Let's move on to NV5F. That'd be Virginia. Virginia, what do you think of characterization for Red Planet Mars?
Well, let's see. I am still awake. Well, I thought that the general production values of the movie were pretty. The screenplay was, pretty well done, and so the actors had some good stuff to work with here. They were good actors. That was definitely, some well-known people in this, and the writing and the acting, the writing of the characters and the portrayal of them by the actors was pretty good. Based on the time when this came out, it was a very quality performance. I think the kids did well. The acting had it had a melodramatic quality to it that you get in this time frame of filmmaking, but that was the standard for the time. But also it had a pretty good, crisp, clean aspect to it that I thought was I thought it was pretty good. I thought the conflict that the husband and wife were having, they had a partnership in their pursuit of this contact with Mars and this radio lab that they had built, and the prospect of a real contact definitely affected each of them differently. And then the tables kind of turned towards the end, and I think that, or especially towards the middle, and then at the end they were united, had a more united front, I think. And I think the character arcs were pretty good. The bad guy was, pretty horrible from the beginning, and pretty shifty and suspicious. I suspected after not too long that I actually thought he was sending all of the messages, and it was all just a fabricated thing. And that was kind of the mystery that. He was doing. I think he was doing some of that, but I think the point is that Mars kind of comes through in the end, and it's almost like they see what he's doing to Earth because they're getting all the messages too that he's sending, the fake ones, and I think maybe they came to our rescue, at the end. So I almost think of Mars as almost like a character in this, and they were, whether it was God talking from Mars or people, and that's the thing is they left it kind of mysterious and had a little bit of that Outer Limits, Twilight Zone kind of vibe to it. I thought that the people playing all the government officials, it was just some good qualities of. I even thought that use of, they did a lot of use of language with no subtitles, and all the languages, all the Russian sounded good. It was all really accurate, and I think they just did a really good job with all that. And I thought the characters were compelling, they were interesting, they were people you could care about, and I think that's, at the end of the day, that's what matters the most, is if you care about these people. And I didn't want to see the Cronins die at the end in the fiery explosion, and the bad guy was, and that's one of those things back then. It was kind of a big deal for a bad guy to sort of get the best of the good guys at the end. So that was kind of a thing for the time. It was pretty upsetting, I'm sure, to a lot of people at the end of this. But I generally liked the characters and the characterization, and I thought the little toddler, their youngest son, I thought he was pretty realistic, because his dad was all reflective and introspective about things, and the kid was just being a little kid, and pretty good. I actually enjoyed this movie quite a bit, and thought it was, a pretty nice just slice of the time. So good way to end 50s month. Back to net, interview 5F.
Good. Thank you, Virginia. Next up is Bill, N5BB. Bill, your thoughts on characterization from KE5ITX.
Well, thank you, Tom. This is N5BB. I agree with a lot of the things Virginia said about the characters. I guess in general kind of liked the characterizations. I thought they were reasonable. I thought the acting was reasonable. Doesn't mean I thought that the screenplay and direction were reasonable, though. For instance, as has been commented earlier, there's this on and off about some of the characters, and especially Linda Cronin, Chris's wife. She's kind of back and forth, and in a way which seemed a little extreme, and I did, especially early in the movie, I didn't understand that. It seemed to me not to be a very smooth situation, and it didn't seem to be her acting. I think she acted pretty well. I think it was direction. I think the director didn't really understand what was going on. That's what I think. But I did enjoy the other characters, the kids and the other people. The bad people were very bad, and at the time, this was an anti-communist movie and an anti-Nazi movie, and it was made in early 1950s. What can you expect? So, yeah, they were bad, 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 bad. And that was just, it was common for the time. I did like the Peter Gray's character, Chris Cronin. He was only 25 years old when he made this. It was one of his early movies. And somebody commented right at the start, right when they saw him, "Oh, you're awfully young, wow." And I thought that was kind of interesting that they actually wrote into the script, I guess, comments about the fact that, "Oh, you're pretty young to be this scientist." Because he did look very young. He looked a lot even younger than 25 to me. Looked like he was, a freshman in college or something. But anyway, I think he did a good job. I can understand the dialogue he said and everything. The dialogue in the movie didn't seem to me to be too stilted or anything. It was kind of reasonable as far as I remember that. What else? As far as some other things kind of more back toward the plot, I completely agree with Jay. You can't send pi in base 10 with some Morse, not even Morse code, just some blips, counting the blips. And that doesn't make it pi. setting those numbers in base 10 doesn't have anything to do with the ratio of the circumference and diameter. That is specifically to do with base 10 and the decimal way of notating. Wasn't even invented until, didn't become popular until, what, about 1400s or something? So, anyway, to me that was kind of ludicrous, and I didn't understand how in the world they could have quickly communicated things like lifespan and solar wind and things like that in that short amount of time. But so that's kind of not necessarily a characterization, but more plot problems. I guess that's it. I'll leave the rest of it for special effects in 5BB.
All right, thank you, Bill. Next up is Chris, K0FPR. Your thoughts on characterizations for red planet Mars?
Thank you. The characterizations I didn't think were that bad. I thought it was reasonably well acted. I thought Linda had some overly hyper-dramatic moments where she's kind of speaking approximately at the top of the show. But they gave her, especially her, very thinly veiled scripture references to work with. I guess it's kind of confusing for her. The great character was people up explaining it authenticated, but that was that kind of thing. So for the rest of the show, pretty good. The kid did a pretty good job of being a kid. Yeah, as far as characterization, I think it was pretty good. I'm with Bill and all the others about the interpretation of pi. Like, I think you communicate that, but by trying to use your signal to express some sort of ratio to the cycle, I guess, of frequency maybe, and then the duration of the distance, maybe expressing a ratio there. I don't know. But the whole question of how do you talk with an alien race reminds me of a more modern movie called Arrival with Amy Adams. That's all I have on characterization. Where we are.
All right, thank you, Chris. Let me ask you something here. Are you on a handy-talkie? Because if you are, I think your power supply or the charger that you're using is causing interference. I heard more noise than I heard you, although on the last transmission, the last round, we got a little bit of that, and then it came back. So I didn't make a comment, but this time it was throughout your transmission. If you are on a handy-talkie, just remove the charger for a minute and transmit again and see. If it's something else, just let us know, please. Try again.
Wasn't on a handy-talkie, actually, at the base station, but it turned off my PSU. Ran on battery. Hopefully this will be better.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure. Maybe it's the power supply for your station. I don't know. It has all those characteristics. It could be a problem with the power supply if you have an external power supply. But it came back with a vengeance on this last round. So and that last transmission. So we'll continue to listen to you. I just thought I'd mention it to you because it is very noticeable. All right, well, let's move on to Jay, KG5BZW. Jay, your thoughts on characterization. Go ahead, from KE5ICX.
All right, this is KG5BZW. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to say much anything different than what the others have said. The characters, especially, I like some of the interactions between certain officials and the scientists and whatnot, and just in the back and forth. I mean, not the scientists, let's just call it the couple who are, both involved. And of course and the Russians. That was I don't know. The characters. Besides the other objections, how the woman was written. I don't know. Sometimes I don't want to say a certain stereotype was being satisfied for the woman and being kind of very flip-flopping. I don't know. I kind of hope that's not the case, but I think that is more just it was written that way just because I think she was actually meant to represent maybe a little bit more diverse set of opinions than one person really normally would have. It's like a combination person just to address all of these certain things, and it really doesn't make sense as a person, but as an individual. But because the pigeonhole principle here, we can only have these guys interacting with so many characters and all before it gets all crazy and hard to follow. I think she might have been written a little bit to cover more opinions, like I said. Yeah, I can't really. The very end bit, I mean, yes, they address the fact that he's known for these evil things that the German scientists. I'll put him. I can't even remember if he strictly was. Well, I mean, it was okay. So the technology was retrieved through the Nuremberg trial. So yeah, okay. He was Nazi, but I don't know. It was kind of interesting because it seemed at first like the scientist had, due to his circumstance, maybe reversed his moral character to he might have maybe improved somewhat. But then, of course, in the end, he demonstrates his trashiness. I don't know. It was still an interesting thing to watch with that. Yeah, I mean, I think I've already addressed my biggest thing, which was more with the overall how the situation was described and everything. That it was like can't really think of any real objections to the characters. They always seem they seem normal for the time. I won't say interesting or a character. They weren't terrible either. I don't know. There's a few things if I think about some more, but I don't. I'd have to meditate over it for 30 minutes just to say something. And there's other people waiting to say to have their thing. It's already almost midnight, so I'm heading it back to net control. K25BZW.
Thank you, Jay. Next up is KI5SXE. Brandon, your thoughts on characterization?
Yeah, Roger. I kind of like the characters. I thought there was the appropriate amount of, mob mentality, all the way up to, a few select characters with multiple layers and levels to them. Like the sun, him coming out of nowhere with the pie, that was pretty clever, as well as the expat, not from the U.S. Well, I guess he's a U.S. prisoner expat, Caldwell, whatever his name was, the scientist. He had a lot of layers. I was really surprised by the depth of his character. He played several facets to him, so you don't really see characters like that in a lot of the such. They're usually very superficial, so it was nice and refreshing to see some thought put into how these characters were going to interact with other characters in their world. KI5 SXE back to net control.
All right, Brandon, thank you. Next is KI5KWG. Cruz, your thoughts on characterization?
KI5KWG caught me with a mouthful. Oh, I won't say much here. It's late. Just for amusement, I was analyzing the characters as they started. The female's dramatic outburst with snippets of paranoia unrelated to any stimulus I caught, and I was going, okay, this looks like borderline personality disorder. And then Captain Over, or Peter Graves, he had a few disconnected outbursts, it seemed to me, at the start also, that came off as a breaking character. But it was just after he got told, I'm swallowing, it was just after he got told that he was probably the most famous man in the world, that we have a scene with him driving through town, and he's explaining to one of the sentries there, he says, oh, I'm just dropping by to see how the press corps is doing. And I immediately went, he's got narcissistic personality disorder. Anyway, I thought that was an amusing scene for me anyway. That's all I've got for tonight. KI5, KWG, I'll just listen.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I was surprised. I looked at the clock. I thought, we got another half hour. And no, it's our quitting time mostly. So let me get through this round, and I'll tell you what we'll do after that. KB9SOK, Sean, your thoughts on characterization, sir?
This is KB9SOK. Yeah, I pretty much agree with what everybody said. I think the acting was adequate. I think it was okay. I agree with Bill on the fact that I don't think they were given the best direction on all of it. Because you have the scientists, there are parts that they seem like scientists, and then the little outbursts and what have you. It just seemed out of place. It didn't feel right. And one other scene that I just got to mention because I thought it was kind of funny was after the son had told them, to use the pie, and and then the father, they're starting to leave, and he's like, well, aren't you going to come along and, see if your idea works and speak to aliens? And he's like, oh, no, Dad, you go ahead and go, and, no big deal, I'll just stay with, I'll just babysit. I'm thinking, really, would any kid really do that? Or any adult? I'd already been at the shack. Would be the father there to see if it works. So I thought that was kind of funny. But since we're getting late, I'll just leave it at that and send it back to that KB9S. Okay.
All right, very good. Thank you, Sean. I'm going to kind of defer my comments. I think everybody's pretty much hit characters and the character traits and all of that. The bad guys were kind of over the top a little bit. I liked our isolationist guy. He was kind of fun. We've seen that character before. So there's a little bit of what do you call it, stereotyping, I thought, in the characters and how they handled. But overall, I thought it was adequate. All right, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and ask for you to bring your call signs. If you've got comments on what would be the next round, special effects or music or something you missed on the prior round, now is the time to go ahead and put your call in. I'll take you in the order that I get you. So if you've got final comments for tonight's movie, Red Planet Mars, come with your call signs now.
November 5, Bravo.
Okay, well, Bill, you may be the last one to say something. I'll give it another round after that in case anybody has changed their mind. So go ahead, Bill, N5BB from KE5ICX.
Tom, this is N5BB. It wasn't an exceedingly good or exceedingly bad movie, so that's why the comments aren't quite as extreme as they could be. Plus, everybody's falling asleep. But anyway, it's getting late. A few notes I had here, which I thought were interesting. At the start of the movie, all the canal thing made me think about something that happened 50 years before this movie was filmed. And that was Percival Lowell, of course, thinking that he saw canals on Mars and they were agricultural and making all these detailed maps and producing, I think, 3 books about it. And a few years later, they built the Mount Wilson telescope and showed that, there weren't any canals on Mars. So to get that old canals on Mars thing from 50 years previously, which I thought was interesting. Then at some point they said that the Martians were going to tell us how we could produce 1,000 people per acre of cropland. So I thought, ooh, that's interesting. I wonder what the current here in 2022, what the current actual agricultural production is of food per acre of crops. So in other words, you take how much food you need for people versus how much land there is. How much food we can feed people. Well, you know what I mean. And it turns out that right now the number is pretty close to 1 acre per person. So if you want to feed 1 million people, a city like Dallas, you need 1 million acres of cropland. And that's for our typical diet, with different kinds of things. And that includes ranch land and things. You need about 1,000 acres. 1 acre per person. So they were talking about, that's why they were oohing and ahhing. They were talking about increasing the agricultural production a factor of 1,000 in today's terms, and it was probably more like a factor of 5,000 back in 1952. And one other really neat thing I saw in the movie, in the scientist's laboratory, he had a clock. And it was a digital clock that was made had dots just the way we would do it. It wasn't segments, it was dots defining the letters. Like an 8 would have multiple little dots around it, but it was like in little angles, like it's done commonly later, and it was a little dot matrix clock. And I thought, whoa, that's a really neat thing for a scientist's office there in 1952. Also, the oscillographic kind of TV out of lock with the flashes by it, well, it did come over, I mean, scientifically it was stupid, or engineering-wise, that was kind of stupid. It didn't look like an oscilloscope or anything. But as far as something that looked good when they on the movie, I think it looked pretty good. You know, you could see the things going back. So in other words, the production values there were okay. Again, I don't think they were very scientific, but as far as something which the average user could understand, and it was one of those nice new TVs that were being deployed, I think it was okay. So the production values were okay. They didn't try to, didn't see an alien. Didn't see very much about his radio. You saw a little bit about the hydrogen tube, which the name was kind of interesting. And by the way, hydrogen valve, because in Europe they called tubes valve, vacuum tubes valve. So valve was an early name for a vacuum tube, and that are used in radios. In the early 50s, that name was still being used a little bit in the United States, so I know why they use that term. So anyway, I thought the production values were okay. They didn't try to show you alien things and alien science and much else. It didn't need much production values. That's all I got inside BB.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Bill. Anyone else have any final comments? Please come with your call.
W5FC.
And Tom, I forgot. He was acting like the communication to the other end was occurring within a couple of minutes. Well, guess what? Because of the delay times to get a signal to Mars and back, it would take between 8 and 48 minutes for a round trip thing if there were no other delays. So that wasn't very reasonable. And that would indicate it was occurring on Earth communication, inside BB.
All right, thank you, Bill. I always wondered, too, they had directional antennas. Remember, they'd have the rotor there. It was really nice, and it was pointing horizontally. I don't know why, but it was. That was kind of a radio thing. We kind of ignored all that stuff. And while the delay and everything was okay and longer and all that, which was kind of cute, I thought that was nice. I would figure that they would be able to figure out where the signal was coming from, and it was Earth. But that's another story. Okay, anyone else have any final comments, anything they want to bring? Come to your call now. Okay, we'll call it done. I'm going to watch Wild Adventure with the Season 2 of Lost in Space. Next week's movie, I have it here. I found yet another 50s movie. This will be the last one for a while. This one's called Monster from the Ocean Floor from 1954. I will send out the links and the information on the movie. If you are listening and would like to be part of this, just send me an email at my call sign, Kilo Echo 5 India Charlie X-Ray, KE5ICX at yahoo.com, and say you want to be on the list. Or you can sign up yourself on Facebook, going to the Afterglow movie group, which is Afterglow and Movie, and sign up there. You'll find the latest movies and updates under Guides. Yes, the tab is called Guides. It'll show you the movies that are coming up. That's it from me. 7-3, everybody. Enjoyed the conversation. This was a good one. I enjoy these the most when we have a lot of things to talk about. See you all next week. This is KE5ICX. I'm clear. Good night.
105 KWG. There are 31 hours, 21 minutes, and about 30 seconds until launch. I'm excited.